Alright mates, let's dive into the land down under, a place so full of unique creatures it's like Mother Nature's experimental playground. From the hopping kangaroos to the cuddly koalas, Australia is a treasure trove of biodiversity. But there's so much more to this vast land than just its iconic animals. We're talking about Australia, and trust me, its history is wilder than a kangaroo on roller skates. Imagine a land untouched by modern civilization, where nature reigns supreme and the landscape was as raw and rugged as it gets. Before the Europeans rocked up with their fancy ships and even fancier hats, Australia was already home to a vibrant and diverse group of people, the Aboriginal Australians. These indigenous people had a deep connection to the land, a bond that was spiritual, cultural, and practical. These folks had been there for a cool 65,000 years, give or take, which makes the rest of us look like we just crawled out of bed. Their history is etched into the very rocks and soil of the continent, with ancient artifacts and rock art telling stories of their ancestors. They lived in harmony with the land, respecting its rhythms and bounty. Their knowledge of the environment was unparalleled, allowing them to farm, hunt, and gather in ways that sustained their communities for millennia. They developed complex social structures, spiritual beliefs, and traditions that are still alive today. Their ceremonies and rituals were not just cultural expressions, but were integral to their way of life, connecting them to the land and to each other. Plus, they managed to survive in a place where everything seems to want to kill you, which is a testament to their resilience and resourcefulness. From the scorching deserts to the dense bushlands, they adapted to every challenge the environment threw at them. Now, I'm not saying everything was sunshine and shrimp on the Barbie. Life in ancient Australia had its fair share of hardships. They had their share of tribal conflicts and environmental challenges. The land could be unforgiving and survival often depended on cooperation and ingenuity. But for tens of thousands of years, they thrived in a land that most of us wouldn't last a week in without air conditioning and a good bug spray. Their story is one of endurance, adaptation, and a profound respect for the natural world. So next time you think of Australia, remember it's not just about the cute animals and stunning landscapes. It's also about the incredible people who have called it home for millennia. Picture this. It's 1770, and Captain James Cook, a man who apparently never met a coastline he didn't want to claim for the crown, stumbles upon this undiscovered land. The vast, uncharted territory that would later be known as Australia was a sight to behold. With its unique flora and fauna, it must have seemed like an alien world to Cook and his crew. They were explorers in the truest sense, venturing into the unknown with a mix of curiosity and imperial ambition. He plants a flag, declares it for England, and boom! Australia officially becomes part of the British Empire. This act of claiming land was more than just a symbolic gesture. It was a declaration of intent. The British Empire was expanding and this new land was to be a jewel in its ever-growing crown. The implications of this were profound, setting the stage for centuries of change and conflict. It's like finding a $20 bill on the ground and then realizing it's actually a coupon for a timeshare presentation. The initial excitement quickly gives way to the realization that there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. The British were not just claiming land, they were laying the groundwork for a new society, one that would be built on the backs of both the indigenous people and the settlers who would follow. The arrival of the Europeans wasn't exactly a picnic for the Aboriginal people. For them, this was an invasion, a sudden and unwelcome intrusion into their lives. The indigenous Australians had lived on this land for tens of thousands of years, developing rich cultures and complex societies. The Europeans, with their foreign ways and technologies, were a disruptive force that would change everything. It was more like a hostile takeover, with diseases, displacement, and conflict becoming the unfortunate appetizers before the main course of colonization. The diseases brought by the Europeans decimated the indigenous populations, who had no immunity to these new illnesses. Displacement followed, as the British claimed more and more land for their own use, pushing the Aboriginal people out of their ancestral homes. Conflict was inevitable as the two cultures clashed over resources and territory. Let's just say, it wasn't the friendliest meet the neighbors moment in history. The initial encounters were fraught with misunderstanding and violence, setting a tone of mistrust and hostility that would persist for generations. The British saw the land as empty and ripe for the taking, while the indigenous people saw it as their home, filled with sacred sites and vital resources. The British, bless their cotton socks, decided to turn Australia into a penal colony, which is a polite way of saying they shipped their convicts off to the other side of the world. This was a solution to the overcrowded prisons in Britain, but it was also a way to establish a foothold in this new land. The convicts, many of whom were guilty of minor crimes, found themselves in a harsh and unforgiving environment, far from home and family. It's like sending someone to their room, except their room is a continent teeming with deadly creatures and dubious food options. The convicts had to contend with the unfamiliar and often dangerous wildlife, as well as the challenges of building a new life from scratch. Despite these hardships, many of them managed to survive and even thrive, laying the foundations for what would become modern Australia. However, not everyone who landed on Australian shores was there against their will. Free settlers, lured by the promise of land and opportunity, also made the arduous journey. These were people looking for a fresh start, a chance to build a better life in a new land. They came from all walks of life, bringing with them their skills, hopes, and dreams. Free settlers, lured by the promise of land and opportunity, also made the arduous journey. They cleared land, established farms, and built towns, slowly transforming the landscape and the society. The work was hard, and the conditions were often harsh, but the promise of a new life kept them going. They were pioneers in every sense of the word, carving out a place for themselves in this new world. They cleared land, established farms, and built towns, slowly transforming the landscape and the society. Over time, these settlements grew and prospered, becoming the towns and cities we know today. The impact of these early settlers is still felt, as their efforts laid the groundwork for the modern nation of Australia. Their story is a testament to human resilience and the enduring spirit of adventure. Gold! The mere mention of the word can make even the most sensible person lose their mind, sending them into a frenzy of excitement and ambition. And in 1851, Australia caught a severe case of gold fever that spread like wildfire. People from all walks of life, from bankers to blacksmiths, packed their bags and dreams and rushed to the gold fields, hoping to strike it rich and change their fortunes forever. It was a time of boom and bust, where fortunes were made and lost overnight, often with little warning. Towns popped up like mushrooms after a rain, filled with saloons, gambling dens, and more than a few shady characters looking to make a quick buck. It was the Wild West, Aussie style, with less tumbleweeds and more eucalyptus trees dotting the landscape. The gold rush didn't just bring wealth, it also brought a wave of immigration, transforming Australia's demographics and shaping its national identity in profound ways. It also sparked a push for greater political autonomy, as the colonists, emboldened by their newfound wealth and independence, started demanding more say in their own affairs. For years, Australia was like a bunch of states hanging out, each doing its own thing. Each colony had its own government, its own laws, and even its own railway gauges, which made travel and trade between them quite complicated. Imagine trying to organize a road trip with friends, but each friend insists on driving a different type of vehicle that can only run on specific roads. It was a logistical nightmare. It was like a roommate situation where everyone shared a kitchen but couldn't agree on whose turn it was to do the dishes. Each colony had its own way of doing things, and while they shared a common heritage and culture, their differences often led to disagreements and inefficiencies. The lack of a unified approach made it difficult to address common issues such as defense, trade, and immigration. But by the late 19th century, the idea of uniting these colonies into one nation began to gain momentum. Visionary leaders and thinkers started to see the benefits of a federated Australia. They believed that a united nation could better manage its resources, protect its borders, and create a more cohesive society. The push for federation was driven by a combination of practical needs and a growing sense of national identity. There were practical reasons, of course, like wanting a unified defense force and a single currency. A unified defense force would ensure that all colonies could be protected under a single command, making it easier to respond to threats. A single currency would simplify trade and economic transactions, fostering a stronger and more stable economy. These practical considerations were crucial in convincing many people of the benefits of federation. But there was also a growing sense of national pride, a feeling that these colonies, with their shared history and unique character, were stronger together than apart. The idea of being part of a larger, united Australia appealed to many, and the movement for federation gained widespread support. People began to see themselves not just as residents of their individual colonies but as Australians, united by a common purpose and destiny. So, on January 1, 1901, After much debate and negotiation, the 6 British colonies of New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, South Australia, Western Australia, and Tasmania officially federated, forming the Commonwealth of Australia. This historic event marked the birth of a new nation, one that was built on the principles of democracy, unity, and shared values. The federation was the result of years of hard work, compromise, and a shared vision for the future. It was a momentous occasion marked by celebrations and a sense of optimism for the future. People from all walks of life came together to celebrate the birth of their new nation. Parades, speeches, and public gatherings were held across the country, reflecting the joy and hope that many Australians felt. The Federation was seen as a new beginning, a chance to build a better and more prosperous future for all. They even managed to agree on a flag, which is more than can be said for some families trying to decide on a restaurant for dinner. The new flag symbolized the unity and identity of the Australian people, representing their shared history and aspirations. It was a symbol of the new nation's strength, resilience, and commitment to a common future. The journey to federation was not easy, but it was a testament to the determination and vision of the Australian people.